thought we would be back doing another show, but something happened this morning or this afternoon on Friday as we record this that we probably felt like we should talk about it. It's catching a lot of attention. It's getting a lot of buzz on social media, which is somewhat ironic because of the fact that the topic is about social media and what it means for AEW, professional wrestling, WWE, whatever, right? So Tony Khan goes online and he posts a series of tweets about Twitter bots. And I don't know how much you know about Twitter bots and how this all works and stuff like that, but it's caught quite a bit of attention. So we thought, you know what? It's an interesting topic because we should probably chat about the tweet itself and the series of tweets that followed. The idea that social media and Twitter is big in the world of professional wrestling. How much of it's real? How much of it isn't? How much of this is Tony Khan being paranoid? How much of this is Tony Khan being legitimate? I have no idea. So I thought, you know what? Let's chat about it. It seems to be trending. So if you're up to it, let's chat about that for a little bit.
Absolutely. It was, I mean, look, it's certainly worth discussion, and I think it's important that we this is not exactly breaking news, but it happened a couple of hours ago. So yeah, I think it's fun to talk about it when it's fresh in the moment. Obviously, nothing bad can come from us just spewing about something that just happened without thinking about it at all. But yeah,
of course, right. don't take any time at all to kind of come up with some really good arguments or some theories or do any research whatsoever.
We've had a couple of hours to dwell on it, so I think our takes are going to be measured for sure.
I looked a little bit too into the whole Twitter bot thing. I mean, it's been an issue going back to 2018, 2017. It's been around, right? And Twitter has done what they can in a lot of ways to try to combat what is. So here's what we should probably do. We should lay out the intro of what this is all about. So Tony Khan goes on Twitter this morning and he writes, an independent study has confirmed that much of the staunch anti-AEW online community aren't real individuals. It's a staff running thousands of accounts and an army of bots to signal boost them. Look closely, these aren't real people. Who'd pay for such a wildly expensive thing? So then he goes on to say, research this one yourselves. You internet detectives thrive in these situations. And then he promotes Rampage tonight. Obviously, that's happening too. And then he says the Boiler Room staff is going to be working overtime on a Friday. I love it, which I think some people took to say, is that a shot at WWE and the Boiler Room and all that other stuff? So first thing I'll ask you is, what did you think of the actual tweet itself? Did you think this was wise? Do you think this is Tony Khan joking around? Do you think he's legitimately serious? Like, I don't know. I'm sure it exists. It happens for WWE. It happens for Ring of Honor. It happens for Impact. It happens for AEW. There's always an anti-promotional group, right?
Yeah.
They don't love everything that AEW does. They don't love everything that WWE does. For every negative AEW fan, there's probably 10 negative WWE fans. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So is this just him getting carried away and going, I don't like what I'm seeing? I don't know that I've actually recognized a huge, staunch anti-AEW negative crowd. Have you?
Not huge, but it is there. Like, there is a very, very vocal group of users on Twitter that absolutely despise AEW and everything AEW does, and are very vehemently pro WWE. Which, you know, look, I think I myself personally, I just enjoy professional wrestling, right? If WWE is good, I'm going to praise WWE. When WWE is bad, I'm going to criticize WWE. When AEW is good, I'm going to praise AEW. When AEW is bad, I'm going to criticize AEW. That's how it is. I just like pro wrestling. There's no brand. There's no brand loyalty from me personally. My personal opinion right now is that AEW is a superior product in terms of enjoyment. That's just my personal belief. I am currently enjoying the AEW product a lot more than the WWE product, but there's no brand loyalty there, right? They're two companies run by two billionaires. I could care less about which one of them ends up on top in this shit throwing contest, right? But there are a lot of people on Twitter who are vehemently one way or the other, right? There's not just vehement. And I think when we use the word bots, we've got to be a little bit careful, because that implies that these are artificial intelligence, that there's some AI, some algorithm, these things, when a lot of it is just real people. It's just real people with brain worms. So I think when Tony Khan's talking about an army of bots, that is kind of letting a lot of people off the hook, really, because they're not bots, they're real people. They're just very, very stupid. But yeah, so there's a lot of people who are vehemently. I will say, from what I have observed, there's obviously WWE is a much bigger company. It's been longer. It has a much bigger fan base. So the pro AEW slash vehement anti AEW crowd does seem to be a little bit more vocal and a little bit bigger. But there's certainly a lot of AEW fans that are similar. Now, whether or not conspiracy that's being I'm sure there's some I'm sure WWE has some PR company who has a few people that go on Twitter and tweet pro WWE anti AEW stuff. But I don't think it's I don't think it's a huge conspiracy. With Tony Khan's tweet, I don't know, man. I think there's a kernel of truth in there somewhere, but it seems a little bit unnecessary. I think everybody does it in every industry. I think it's sort of prevalent, as particularly on Twitter. We see it in politics all the time. But yeah, I don't think he needed to tweet this, but the tweet is getting engagement, and if people are going to watch Rampage, fair enough,
Okay, so a couple questions coming out of that then. One, is this good traction? Is this the type of attention that Tony Khan wants and needs for AEW? Do you think that this tweet was meant to gain some interest in the show tonight? Or do you believe that this is just some sort of response, some quick sort of, hey, I don't like what I'm seeing, let's just blech out on social media, right? What do you think happened here?
So I mean, I think he really wants people to check out the Jon Moxley Wheeler Yuta match tonight, which, by all accounts, from people that have obviously this tonight's Rampage was taped on Wednesday after Dynamite. By many accounts, this Moxley Wheeler Yuta match is supposed to be very, very, very good. So I'm excited to see that. But I think he really wants people to watch that. I don't know, mate. Look, I don't know, man. Who can get in the brain of a billionaire, man? Tony Khan, he's a wrestling fan, and he's a millennial, so he's not like other billionaires, but at the end of the day he is still a billionaire, and being a billionaire rots your brain. So I don't know, man. I think maybe he was just having a weird one today and thought it would.
He's had them before. He's had weird ones before. We've seen it with Big Swole when she left AEW. He got really defensive and very quickly. We've seen it with, and she made comments about just the diversity in AEW and why she left and who was being pushed and who wasn't. And he got all up in, that, and was very quick to respond. And some of that made sense and some of that didn't look so good on him, right? There's other stuff where he's really, for a guy who's putting his heart and soul on it, we'll give him this. He's putting his heart and soul into AEW. So when you do anything like that, you're going to be defensive of it. Like if people are going to come out and talk crap about the company or talk crap about the people you're pushing or the matches or the people that you've chosen to employ, you're probably going to get defensive. Now, Vince McMahon, and I'll point to something that he said in the Pat McAfee interview, took a while to learn this lesson where he said, look, there was a time that I cared, right? That I didn't know it wasn't a good idea for me to try to defend myself because people are just not going to like me. That's just the reality of it. Vince McMahon doesn't care anymore, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that Vince McMahon's approach is perfect or anything like that, but he's understood now that you can't win these minor battles all the time. They're just not going to be able to do it, so why bother engaging in the war? And I wonder if Tony Khan hasn't learned that lesson yet. If this is something where he's going, you know what? I don't like what I'm seeing. He said this bad. Just coming off WrestleMania weekend, so the buzz is all in WWE's corner. Well, if all of that just sort of added up and he just went out and, brain barf this stuff on social media, or if he actually specifically did this to get the attention it's getting. I don't know. Like, that's the question. Is he learning from his past mistakes by saying, I don't need to be engaging in this sort of thing? Or is he understanding that by engaging in this, it's going to get a lot of conversation and that could lead to viewers? I honestly don't know.
I mean, it is interesting. Yes. And again, the Big Swole thing, he still hasn't really, I think he still has, he hasn't really said anything about that since it happened. I think maybe he doesn't feel remorse or regret or anything. Look, I don't know if I like Big Swole. I don't know if she's left a big hole in the AEW roster in terms of just in-ring ability. But I still think some of the stuff that he said at the time was a little bit problematic, and maybe just thought in the moment and didn't really
Yeah.
sort of think it through. I mean, he probably shouldn't even be running his own Twitter account, let's be honest.
Well, that's the
But
thing, right? Like, is this really something that he should be looking after? Should he be
yeah.
able to, should he not have a filter of people before he's able to tweet anything that have to look at what he wants to write and go, you probably
Hmm.
shouldn't put that out there,
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
Like that just seems to be the thing that you would do, right? There's always a risk in having somebody else run your Twitter account for you. And maybe that's what he's worried about because this is also a guy who's taken pretty much all of the booking capabilities away from everybody else he's ever had do that in the company, and he's
Mm-hmm.
doing it all himself. Now
Hmm.
he's doing it all for Ring of Honor, and we've just heard that he's doing a lot of it for AAA Mexico.
Hmm.
So this is a guy who's got so much on his plate
Hmm.
that he's probably boiling over at
On
times.
top of that, he also is heavily involved in an NFL team and an
That's
English
right.
league soccer team. He basically picked the three worst fan bases in the world to be involved in, right?
Yeah.
Wrestling, NFL, and soccer. So he's got, yeah, I mean, he's getting it from all sides. Yeah, I don't know. He's an interesting fellow, man, and I've got a lot of respect for him in the same way I've got a lot of respect for Vince McMahon, even if I don't necessarily agree with him ideologically and stuff like that, you know. But yeah, I mean, this tweet, it's just the worst thing about it is that he mentioned a study, he cited a study, and then didn't provide any evidence
Yeah.
or any link to that study. That's the biggest. If he had just shared a link, dropped a link as well, that would have like, I don't think it would be as controversial as it was, and we wouldn't be talking about it as much. As
Yeah,
it stands,
for sure.
it looks like he just woke up woke up today and was just like, you know what, F it, I'm
Yeah,
just gonna.
it's like he rolled over, saw a tweet he didn't like, and that was the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, right? Like he just said,
Mm,
you know what, that's it, let's go, right?
mm,
It's really tough when you don't provide. Like, and that's why I wondered if the tweet when I first saw it was somewhat of a troll job, right? Because he's put it out there, and then he said, "Hey, you internet detectives, you guys go look this up and tell me if I'm right or wrong." It's almost like he's engaging in a game that he wants people to do the work for him, and he's just like, "Yeah, prove me wrong." And
mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if that's the best idea. I did have a question for you though, because you mentioned it, and I'm with you. I like a lot of things that AEW is doing. I don't know that I would say that I, on a weekly basis, prefer AEW over WWE or vice
Mm-hmm.
versa, but I do like a lot of the things that AEW is doing, and then there's a lot of things I don't like, just like WWE, right? Some things you love, some things you don't. How much of this do you think that if Tony Khan is legitimately referring to an anti AEW sentiment, is actually about AEW, or it's more about people helping out or promoting or whatever they want to be doing here? And we'll get into the whole idea of this being a WWE thing. But how much of this is pro WWE and how much of this is anti AEW, do you think?
Sorry, my dogs are barking.
That's all right. Didn't love the question.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is both, right? I think for some reason, when I was talking about this earlier, this sort of brand loyalty, brand warfare thing, it's not just wrestling. You see it. I think part of it comes down to, because you see it in sports all the time, right? And in sports, it makes sense because you have geographical sort of rivalries and stuff. I mean, it makes a little bit more sense. I mean, it's still a little bit weird if you actually sort of take a step back and look at it, like sort of analyze it, separate yourself from it, and you're like, oh, these people, you know, if you look at like soccer teams in Europe, you're like, oh man, these people support different clubs and they hate each other so much that they beat each other up over it or whatever.
Yeah.
That's weird. So I think some of it is like wrestling fans trying to maybe find an element of that in. I think there was a lot of hardcore WWE fans who, it's just it's weird, right? Because you get, like I was saying, I like professional wrestling. I like WWE. I like AEW. I'm here to enjoy professional wrestling as an art form, right? I think there are people who only watch WWE and they have this weird sort of fascination and appreciation for Vince McMahon based on what he's built and the sort of the memories that he has given them over the years, right? I think a lot of people sort of hold the glory days of WWE like very close to their heart and they sort of admire Vince McMahon in sort of this like weird Walt Disney-esque sort of figure, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where they sort of cite him as creating these sort of influential, pivotal, important, sentimental moments in their life. And I think that when AEW came along, suddenly, I think, and they've seen competition come and fail, right? They've seen competition come and take the fight to WWE and fail, like WCW, TNA. At one point, there was like, I mean, there was a minute where people thought TNA could be like a legit competitor to
Yeah.
WWE, right? And then WWE just trampled over them for a decade. And so I think a lot of people have been expecting that to happen with AEW, like a lot of hardcore WWE fans. Yeah, I think there's just sort of an insecurity there when it comes to when AEW launched and they were legit and they had money behind them and they were able to attract big stars, a lot of big talent, a lot of very like talent that these you see it on Twitter, you see this all the time, right? You see people, pro WWE people will talk about, when a wrestler is at WWE, they'll go on and on about how much they love them, right? I was recently looking at one particular timeline where this guy was, I searched Adam Cole on his account, on his profile, and when Adam Cole was at NXT, this guy was gushing over Adam Cole constantly, just would not shut up about how much he loved Adam Cole and how talented Adam Cole was and how Adam Cole needed to go to the main roster. And then as soon as Adam Cole jumped ship to AEW, suddenly Adam Cole was like the worst wrestler in the world, can't cut it in the big leagues, blah, 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 right? So yeah, I think your original question was, is this pro WWE or anti AEW? It's a bit of both, man. It's like it's anti AEW because they're so pro WWE. I think there's a lot of pro WWE people who are perfectly fine with AEW, but for some reason there's a large vocal group of pro WWE people that despise everything AEW does, even when AEW does good stuff, and they do good stuff quite a lot, right? The in-rings, in terms of in-ring action, right? Not every booking decision of Tony Khan's has been perfect, right? He's done a lot of really stupid things, actually. But normally the in-ring action is brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So what do you think?
well, one thing I would hope is that, and I don't think it's a coincidence that this is happening when Cody Rhodes makes a jump. I'm not saying Cody Rhodes is behind it. I'm not suggesting it's related to Cody Rhodes and why. I mean, he did make a comment on an interview with WrestleMania about Twitter bots, just whether that's a coincidence or this is where it's stemming from. But I would hope that people who are pro WWE and maybe anti WWE, because they're pro WWE, understand what it is that will happen with WWE if successful. We've seen this already. WCW was successful. What happened to WWE? It got better, right? When there's competition and it's legitimate competition, WWE has no choice but to get better, right? That's what you would hope will happen here, right? If AEW is successful, and it's proving that it seems to be, the WWE is going to go, okay, well, I guess we got to step up our game. It's great for everybody, right? It's good if the wrestlers have places to go, and not everything on every product is going to be a home run. It is what it is. But you want AEW to be successful. You want to enjoy both products. I don't know why you wouldn't. And you would hope that people do the research and go, man, the last time that there was actually competition here, this was great for everyone. I mean, it was the best time, people will argue, in wrestling. When you had the Monday Night Wars and the Attitude Era and all the things going back, both shows were fantastic. Neither show was perfect all the time, but both shows were great, right? So you would kind of go, man, let's hope that these people who are bashing anti-AEW simply because they're pro WWE understand that. There is a little bit of, to me anyway, some distaste for what AEW is starting to become. They are, in some ways, hypocritical in that they started and built their promotion on the fact that they were a wrestling company, that they would not fire people, that they would not have too huge of a roster, that they would not, bring people in then release. And they're starting to do all those things they said they would not do. And in that respect, you have to kind of go, man, they're not that different from WWE.
Yeah.
And you have to wonder, okay, now that push comes to shove, they have this massive roster. Some of these original contracts are coming up. Now that Cody Rhodes has made a jump. Oh, and by the way, Cody Rhodes has said some people in AEW want to make a jump too. You got to wonder, okay, is AEW really that different than WWE and all the things they said they stood against?
Right, yeah.
Are they really against it? And I wonder if some of that has to do with where this just sudden anti-AEW stuff is coming from. Because everybody can dislike the product a little bit. There's not that there's some stuff on the show I just can't stand. But
yeah, for sure.
But it doesn't mean that I don't want them to do well and have the greatest product ever. So the WWE and
Yeah.
AEW both up their game every week and give us
Right.
the best product we can as wrestling fans, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I wonder if it's all just a timing thing. If the crap just hit the fan all at the same time between Cody jumping, the Twitter bots comment he made, saying people are leaving, some people being a little anti AEW and some of the matches and the stars they're pushing, losing some of these guys, some of their fans, like fan favorites, are disappearing off television. Maybe it's just the perfect storm, right? And it all sort
Yeah.
of came together at the same time.
And I will say it goes back to what I said earlier. At the end of the day, like no matter how much you like either company or both companies, at the end of the day, they're still run by two billionaires with who that run companies that are trying to exist within the framework that is capitalism. So there's always going to be, there's no way you can be like. And I thought this, like I love AEW, and I thought this at the beginning, where I was a bit like, where people there was a lot of people jumped ship, or like they even jumped ship. There were people that had become disillusioned with WWE a long time ago and got very, very excited when AEW started, because I think they thought it was going to be this sort of like woke alternative to WWE. And at the time, I remember thinking it's not going to be a woke alternative to WWE because it's owned by a billionaire.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen. It's going to be like there's not he's not going to keep everybody under contract forever just out of the goodness of his heart, because if he had a heart he wouldn't be a billionaire. Right?
Yeah, or at least if he thought with his heart first, he would.
Yeah,
be,
exactly.
Right? And
yeah.
even McMahon even said that in the interview. He said there was times when he was talking to Pat McAfee that he used to keep people on because it felt bad to let them go.
Yeah.
And then he put other people. When he became a public company, he said it made my life in that respect much simpler.
Yeah.
Right. Like it might not feel as good. It still feels like crap, but it isn't my choice anymore.
Yeah, it's out of
right?
his hands, right?
Yeah, it's a public company. It has to be done when the wrestlers aren't pulling in the revenue that is required to keep them on staff, right? So it became a decision that wasn't about his heart. It became a business decision that multiple people were making. And you have to know, I agree with you. If Tony Khan is going to be a successful business person, he cannot lead with his heart first. He has to lead with the bottom line and the economics of what he's doing time and time. If he doesn't, AEW won't last.
And yeah, it's like, oh, well, that's the thing as well. You said about WWE going public. I mean, you can pinpoint so much change to the point that they went public, right? Like it's, I think we sort of, I mean, WWE is the best at doing this themselves, where they kind of rewrite their own history in a way. Like a lot of these documentaries we see are kind of whitewashed to an extent. But yeah, we kind of analyze WWE's history through rose-tinted glasses a lot. But you can actually pinpoint like the moment WWE went public, so much of the business model just changed completely, right? And that's what he was saying in that McAfee interview, where it's like those decisions became a lot easier for him to make because that he wasn't really making them. They were being made for him by his board or by the shareholders or whatever, right? What I will say though, Tony Khan has been very vocal about this, where he didn't want to, because WWE released a lot of people from their contracts before their contracts had expired during the pandemic, right? It was like over 100 or something. They just cut them loose, budget cuts or whatever. Tony Khan has been quite vocal about how he didn't want to do that, which is why he's letting people's contracts elapse, right? So Marco Stunt, Joey Janela, their contracts are just elapsing and he's not renewing them. He said that he didn't want to let anybody go during the pandemic, although we are still in a pandemic, so I don't know. But yeah, so that was at least his defense of the situation.
I think he's been true to that. I think the only people that he's really
part.
let go are the ones that have caused their own demise.
Right, Jimmy Havoc.
I've done some stuff where you're like, yeah, he's not keeping that guy.
Yeah.
Right, like, and in most cases, I would assume, or people have chosen to leave. Right, and like Cody has chosen to do his own thing.
Right. Yeah.
But I would say he's been true to that.
And we haven't spoke since. Did we haven't spoke since Raw aired, have we? Last time we chatted was prior.
The last time we chatted was just before the Monday of WrestleMania Monday, so we should probably do that a little bit here today too. Just to switch topics, but yeah, we did not. We talked about WrestleMania. We recapped it on episode 1 of the TheSportster podcast. Which, by the way, for people that are watching this, just a quick reminder: we have brought the podcast back. You can now check it out on Spotify, all your favorite Apple Podcasts, all your favorite podcast platforms. It's now called The Sportster Show. It used to be called Wrestling Sheet Radio, which was run by Ryan Satin, who's now with WWE and Fox and all that stuff. But it's been a couple years since we've done this podcast, so we're bringing it back. And so our first episode was the WrestleMania 38 recap. We talked night 1 and night 2. We sort of dipped our toes into what WrestleMania Monday would look like, and there was a couple surprises on the show that I don't think either one of us expected. So as we finish up this conversation, maybe make some closing remarks about Tony Khan here. We'll move into that.
Awesome.
What's your final? Let's do that. Final thought on what Tony Khan had to say today and what you think this might mean moving forward.
Yeah, final thought is that there is like an element of truth to what he said. Like there absolutely is. All companies do this. There is some shenanigans and some chicanery going on social media to try and it's like propaganda basically, right? And WWE does have a history of smearing competitors and rivals, right? It's not, this isn't like some conspiracy theory. You can go and you can like look into this yourself. They have done stuff like this in the past. So there is like an element of truth to what Tony Khan was saying. Whether or not it was a topic that needed to be broached in a tweet thread where he's promoting tonight's episode of Rampage is a completely different story. Personally, if that was me, I wouldn't have said anything. And again, all billionaires should have somebody running their Twitter account for them. Because billionaires all have brainworms. So that's my final thought.
Well, my thought is this: I wonder what this will do if it was on purpose, if it will have the intended consequences, so to speak, that he wanted. Right? If he went out there and he posted that in some sort of way to engage in some sort of WCW or AEW versus WWE war, get people on one side firmly enough, if that will backfire in the fact that people are probably actively going to be looking now for these anti-AEW tweets that are out there, right? Which I don't know if they would have before. And so if you're kind of going, what the heck's he talking about? Like, because I honestly, when I saw that, I mean, other than the obvious, oh, I hate this or I hate that, which we see for both the AEW and WWE, if people really started to notice a trend where just all of a sudden these Twitter bots or whatever people were just actively tweeting over and over and over again how bad AEW was. I never saw it.
Yeah.
Right? So now I'm thinking, well, what were these tweets he's talking about? Right? So I'm looking for them. And when you look for that, what do? Do you defend AEW and then post your own tweets? Or do you start to read them and go, you know what? There's a point there. Right? So I don't know if that's a good idea or a bad idea. And I'm curious to see, what backlash he faces, because there's been a lot of talk about what he said and why he said it, and not posting the study, and people actually not liking AEW, which they might not have said otherwise. And then there's other people who have vehemently defended him and said, what, AEW is awesome. I don't know why anybody would be doing this. It's pretty stupid that people would be creating accounts, and it's probably WWE, and it's all like, and there's going to be some of that too. So I want to see how this unfolds, because I don't know if it has the intended results that he meant for it to have. Yeah. And hopefully it's just not another thing that he's done where you're like, man, that guy just needs to learn not to say nothing. Right?
Yeah, knowing him, he won't say anything about it again. Like, we won't hear anything about it again. He just won't tweet about it. He won't mention it again. It will just with the Big Swole stuff. I mean, as you were saying, I have I obviously I run the TheSportster Twitter account. I do see a lot. You see it on both sides, though, right? But like I said at the top of the show, you see it on both sides. But it does seem to be more common on the pro WWE side. But that's just because WWE has a bigger fan base and a much more loyal, hardcore fan base, because they've been around for a lot longer. You do see it will be people with Seth Rollins profile pictures, Brock Lesnar profile pictures, right? And they will just dump on anything AEW does, and they'll share like out of context clips, or just like they'll share clips of botches or something, which botches happen on every wrestling show. Botches are like part of professional wrestling, part of the art form. They're enjoyable sometimes. They're not like a blooper or whatever, right? And everyone does them. It's not like they're more prevalent in AEW than they are anywhere else. Maybe a little bit.
Depends on what match you're watching.
Yeah, but also those people haven't spent 5 years down in Orlando training to become TV ready, and then come out barely TV ready,
Or even when you spent 60 years in the industry and you take a stunner like McMahon, doesn't matter how long you've been in the business, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And he's taken a lot of stunners as well, so it was very weird that, like we said, he must have been ribbing. It must have been a rib, man.
Yeah, I still love it. It was one of my favorite moments from WrestleMania, whether it was on purpose or not. I still think it was. It couldn't have been done any better way, if intentional or not. It just pure.
Have you seen the video of Mick Foley laughing at it?
No, but I saw
Oh,
the edited version that they put on Raw, where they cut out all the goofy stuff and made it look like $1 million. But
yeah, that was
no,
funny.
yeah,
There's a video of Mick Foley just absolutely corpsing at he's watching WrestleMania at home and he's just howling at the stunner. Very funny stuff. Yeah.
That's awesome.
All
right. Let's quickly talk about WrestleMania Monday. There's a few big things that happened. I have to say this: the show was not good, but there was a lot that happened on it. That if you had restructured it in a way to better order the events, it might not have been that bad. But the show itself was just not very good. Like there was a lot of stuff that you're like, man, did they really use this traditional show to do this? Like that's what I felt when I watched it. I'm like, man, they were rolling off of 2 really strong nights with WrestleMania, and then they gave us this.
Right.
But that said, there was a couple of returns. Veer debuted; he looked pretty good. MVP turned on Bobby Lashley, which I thought was an interesting idea and storyline. The Ezekiel stuff, I got to get your take on that. What's your thoughts on Elias / Ezekiel?
I mean, look, I'm interested to see where it goes.
Do you think it will go anywhere? Do you think they've gone that far, that this wasn't just 1 week and let's see what happens? Or do you think they have a plan?
I think the way that people were talking about it will make them want to continue. Like, I definitely got people talking, and I think it's the same with the Veer stuff, right? I think they might persevere with this a little bit. It has Bruce Pritchard written all over it, in my opinion. I could be wrong, but it's got Pritchard written all over it. I mean, look, I sometimes I totally get it when they need to repackage someone. I don't know that Elias needed to be repackaged. I don't know if there was a point when he was extremely over. I don't know if he was as over as that by the time he was off TV. But yeah, I mean, I think there was still some cash in that cow. It's always a little bit sad when they kill off a character like that because inevitably they bring them back. So I'm sure we haven't seen the last of Elias, the Wanderer or whatever, the wandering musician.
That's a good point. I wonder if they're doing this with the full intention to bring Elias back and have us hate Ezekiel so much that we're so excited for Elias.
Yeah,
that when he does return, we're like, thank God.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
Like I would believe he was gone long enough that you could have just brought Elias back and got a huge pop on Monday.
Yeah.
And that he's been out of our mind for so long now. Just seeing him again as Elias would have been good. I think the downfall was when they tried to make him into like an iTunes pop star babyface, and they talked about his chart-topping music more than they talked about the fact that he was just, kind of a heel guy that was annoying and whatever. Yeah. I thought that was when his character was at its height, right? Natural babyface transition would have made sense for me, but they tried to force feed it, right? And then it got old and stale.
He was like, his gimmick was that he was like if Rick Rolling was a wrestler. Do you remember where he would just keep coming out like I went to I can never remember the number, but I was at the last WrestleMania that was in New Orleans, right? The one where Danielson had his first match back, and it was when John Cena was trying to get a match with the Undertaker, and then Elias
32, but it might not be.
It might be 32, yeah. And then Elias comes out, and the reaction that got was extremely funny. Yeah. And my wife was there, and she's not a big wrestling fan. And I remember she was just like, "Oh, this guy just rickrolls people." she was like super into it. Yeah. He was much better as a heel for sure.
So what's the whole like younger brother? I am Ezekiel. Like, was this the look? Do you know? I mean, you're a big video game guy more than I am. Was this the look that they were talking about with the 2K22 that they had? We're all machos, 2 Macho Man, Randy Savage. We got to change it up. That's why we're not using them. Like, is this the look that was in the video game?
Interesting. I haven't played the game, and I'm not sure, but
because that was the deal, wasn't it? Like they had this character reimagining that they wanted to do, and then Vince saw it and he said, "Nah, it's too much like Macho Man."
And it was Elias, you mean? Or
yeah, but they had already stuck him in the game. They had made an avatar for him that looked a lot like, from what I understand, something similar to what we saw.
I can see that happening, Monday. Right? Yeah, I mean, he did it. I can see it if they made like a computer-generated version of Elias, that it would look like a little bit like Randy Savage. I don't know if any. Yeah, I don't know if the repackaging of the character had anything to do with that. But you never know, man. You never know.
Well, you talked. I'll ask you about Cody Rhodes' opening promo too. I think it was you that had said they're probably going to give him 20 minutes to start the show,
Yeah, I
and
called it.
they did exactly that.
Yeah.
Did you like the promo? Was all about Dusty and the championship and getting it for his dad, even though he can't give it to his dad physically now because Dusty has passed away,
Mhm.
and then he wants to win it for himself and the fans and Dusty and the American Dream, legacy, and all that stuff. Did you like the promo? What did you make of it?
I liked I liked what I liked what it meant and what it represented, and I like where it's going. Right, the story of the dashing, handsome, movie star looking son of Dusty Rhodes finally being able to accomplish what the legendary Dusty Rhodes was unable to accomplish. That's a good story, man. That writes itself. They can't drop the ball with that, right? It's going to be a long term thing. Maybe not SummerSlam, maybe even beyond that. Maybe we're talking next year's WrestleMania, right? Cody has to win the championship at some point. For
Yeah.
any of this to mean anything, it has to happen.
Do you think they'll go as far? I see the boyhood dream Shawn Michaels storyline here. That's what I see when I hear this. Do you think they'll go as far as actually putting those two things side by side, or will they avoid any relationship of the Shawn Michaels storyline to this? Even though it's
Interesting.
going to be very parallel and it's going
Mhm.
to be very similar, do you think they'll go, man, Shawn Michaels once did this and he got the boyhood dream and he won at WrestleMania. Cody's kind of doing the same thing, the boyhood dream of making his father proud and winning the title he could never take home and keep. Like, that's what it is to me, and that's why I think it's going to take a while because you got to build that up. You got to have Cody run through hurdles and adversity and not get there, and then almost get there, and then finally get there, right? But do you think they'll associate the Shawn Michaels storyline to it, or they'll stick away from it?
I'm sure it will be referenced. I don't know that they'll ram it down our throats, but I'm sure they'll bring it up at some point. And yeah, and we know Michaels is there all the time, so yeah, I'm sure it will be brought up. But like, yeah, the promo, as I said, the promo was very much a Cody Rhodes promo. I liked what it represented. I like where the story's going. When I called it, I was like, they're gonna give Cody 20 minutes up top. When I was watching it, I was like, this is definitely a Cody Rhodes promo because he's doing the sort of holding back the tears thing that he did
Yeah.
in AEW sometimes. I think I love Cody, but I think his promos can be a little bit cringe sometimes. But at the end of the day, it was effective and it
Yeah,
worked.
I will give him some props. He knew how to work the crowd. Like there were
Definitely.
times in that where I thought he might have lost them, and then he
Hmm.
just waited for 10 seconds, and they went woo, and they all went
And if you've
crazy,
ever
right?
seen the match that he's talking about, the superstar Billy Graham versus Dusty Rhodes, Madison Square Garden, September '77, that if you want to see a true over superstar wrestler, Dusty Rhodes in that match, it's just unparalleled. Like
Yeah.
the reaction he gets when he wins via count out, when he's declared the winner, is the roof comes off the place. And I long for a day when we'll have a star that over
Yeah,
again.
wouldn't that be something? What'd you make of the Bobby Lashley MVP split? Are you into this?
Makes sense, I guess. Lashley's a babyface now. He doesn't really, don't think he's sort of outgrown the need for a mouthpiece. He still can't really cut a promo, but hopefully they don't need him to cut many promos. He's just doing well as a babyface so far. Like I said, he's more over. He got a huge reaction on Monday, more over than he has been since the Trump WrestleMania, I think. Yeah, and then Omos needs a mouthpiece, so it
Yeah.
makes sense. It makes sense.
I'm totally for MVP and Omos, but I'm not sure I love the idea of Lashley as a sustained baby face.
Mm-hmm.
He's such a good heel, even if he's not saying anything. He's
Yeah,
just a big, monstrous
yeah.
house of a man, and he's a better heel to me.
We'll see how
Um,
it goes.
and if they don't really have a plan for him, that's what I'm concerned about, right? Yeah, okay, you've made him a babyface so that you could get Omos and MVP together, but what are you going to do with Lashley now? And I still wonder if they've somewhat painted themselves into a corner because I feel like they worked themselves out of it, I guess, a little when Lashley won at WrestleMania. And now that they've reinvented Omos with MVP, you've sort of saved Omos here. But at what point does Omos not lose? Like he's got to win with MVP at some point in his corner, I would assume, right? So I don't know what that means for Lashley. One of the things I really liked was the Damian Priest Edge stuff. I believe there's more coming here. Do you think that we're going to see more members in this group, or is it just these two for a while?
Yeah, I think we're going to see. I think we might see some pretty soon. So the rumor, like we've written on the site, thesportster.com, you can go check it out. Some people think Rhea Ripley is going to be added to it. There's certainly been some foreshadowing in terms of, you know, mise en scène in some of the background scenes. There was like some purple lighting in the background of one of her recent backstage segments, I guess. Yeah, so I think we could see Rhea Ripley there. I think she'd be a good fit. I'm intrigued. I don't know that it's it's not personally how I would book Edge right now, but I'm certainly looking forward to seeing how it goes. And yeah, I like the suits. I like the presentation of it at least.
Ripley makes sense for me just based on the Liv Morgan stuff from Monday. You know, like they're already barreling her through another tag team partner, so she's broken off from Nikki Ash, and now she's probably going to be breaking off from Liv Morgan. Seems way too early to pull the plug on this, which to me suggests they have something else they want her to do, and that something else might be the Edge group. And then we've heard Tommaso Ciampa too. That would be interesting because I think it was on the last show we talked about Tommaso Ciampa is a guy to me who should get a ton of respect but might not because of his size.
Right, and having him next to Damian Priest every week isn't going to do him any favors.
No, but putting him in a group might.
Yeah,
right?
that's
Like
true,
sticking him in a faction where he can sort of be, whether it's the brains or he can take on some sort of personality or some sort of role within that group. I do wonder if that will help him. So
yeah,
it could just help him get over, right? Because people will still know who he is, even if WWE doesn't necessarily reference what is going on there. Final question I was going to ask you from Raw. I was just drawing a blank here, but I was going to ask you about Seth Rollins, if you think that feud's going to continue with Cody, because they sort of teased it. He comes out and shakes his hand, doesn't say anything else.
Yeah. I think that might be done for now. I think we might see something a little bit further down the line. But yeah, I think they're going to move on from that for now. I think there's other stuff. I don't think we need to run it back right away. The match was good. The match was really good. I would like to see them wrestle again, but I don't want to see it anytime soon. I certainly don't want to see it in 5 minutes on SmackDown or Raw, you know? So, yeah. But I think they're done for now.
And then what's the next step for Roman Reigns? He teased that tonight on SmackDown he's going to reveal his future.
Yeah.
I guess, knock on wood, thank you that he is not seemingly injured. There was a rumor coming out of the show that he might have been. It doesn't look like he is. He showed up. There's no bandages on his arm. He's raising his hands nice and fine. So I think he's okay. He says he's going to tease what he's doing now on Friday. Do you envision a certain person being?
It's hard to say, really. It's really difficult to say. I don't know who it could be. Maybe he could. Maybe he's not injured, but I wouldn't be surprised if he took a couple of weeks off anyway. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Who do you think it could be? I really can't.
Well, the obvious answer to me seems to be Drew McIntyre. I don't know if that's what you want to do. I've also heard that Cody might be on SmackDown tonight. I don't think you go there yet, though. No. I would avoid that one for a while. They're advertising Brock Lesnar for WrestleMania Backlash, which may not mean he's on the show, but that also might not mean he's leaving, which is typically what he might do after WrestleMania or a big loss or some big storyline. He takes a little time off. He's having a blast. He says he's loving his comeback right now, so he's probably sticking around. So I don't know. Maybe there's a rematch here. Maybe there isn't. My only concern, I suppose, if you have Roman Reigns take a little while off, and I know you just suggested a couple weeks, but what if he's holding both titles? Do you then run a pay-per-view without a championship match?
I mean, yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. Have they ever done that? Have they ever?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, without one of them.
But I don't imagine that it happens.
I mean, what would be ideal is if they had treated the mid-card titles, particularly the Intercontinental title, if they had treated that title with just a tiny little bit of respect over the past couple of years, then that can become the sort of de facto top tier title while the champ takes a break or whatever, right? Yeah. Which I think is traditionally part of the point of that sort of belt.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're saying is that had they set the title up in a way that it could have been respected as a main event draw,
right? Yeah. Whereas now, if they do that,
away with making it a main event. At this point, he wasn't even at WrestleMania,
right? And we've seen the Intercontinental title matches main event before, right? SummerSlam '92. Even more recently than that, I feel like there was. Man, I swear, I think there might have been an Attitude Era match where there was where the Intercontinental title was on the line in the main event, but it might have been it might have been like a winner take all match, right? When Austin won both of them or something.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a few. Like '92 was the big one, Bulldog and Hitman. WrestleMania 6, obviously, Ultimate Warrior and Hulk Hogan was the Intercontinental
That's it.
part
Yeah,
of it.
and that.
But more recently, I don't. There's been one or two, but I don't think it's
Especially
been
on
like.
Raw and SmackDown
Yeah,
and
it
stuff,
certainly
but not
hasn't
pay-per-views.
been written up as the main
Well,
draw
it
for a
hasn't
big
even been
pay-per-view.
defended. The Intercontinental title hasn't even been defended on a pay-per-view in over a year, I think, right? Which is
Jeez.
just
If
kind
that's
of
true,
what.
that's a crazy
Yeah,
stat.
it's very, very wild. I think they need to maybe just merge the US and Intercontinental titles and just start start booking that mid card title a little bit better.
Yeah, yeah. I've always been a proponent on the shows that there are too many titles in WWE. I don't believe that they'll ever limit that simply if for no other reason than merchandise sales. You
That's
know.
another thing that AEW is a trap that they're falling into as well, right? When they started, they only had a couple of belts, and now they've got loads, and now they've also got all the Ring of Honor belts. Like
Yeah.
all the Ring of Honor titles are now de facto AEW titles. We're seeing them on AEW TV. We're seeing them defended on AEW TV. Yeah, so I don't know what. I don't. Yeah, it's like another trap they're falling into. Just
Yeah, I think the start of that was the FTW Championship. Once they brought that out and started making that something that people were legitimately like, fine if you want to make it the $1 million championship that never gets defended and you just wear it because you're bragging, okay. But when you start defending it in matches, you're like, this isn't even a sanctioned title.
and there's talk
AEW.
of a trios title and women's tag titles and stuff. So
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see. At least they've got. At least with Ring of Honor, they've potentially got some more. I don't know if Ring of Honor is gonna. I don't know if they're gonna get a TV show. I kind of don't think they should. I think they should stick to like a streaming platform. But yeah, at least there's more space for those titles to be defended. You know.
All right, let's close the show, but I have one more a topic that I want to address. It'll be quick, but who do you think is showing up on SmackDown tonight? Because typically the SmackDown following WrestleMania has as many, if not just slightly fewer surprises than the WrestleMania Monday tends to have. I'm hearing Lacey Evans. She should be on the show tonight. Whether she's actually on during the 2 hours or not, she's supposed to be backstage from what we understand. Do you expect anybody to show up? There's a few women that I'm waiting to have come back, but
Yeah.
Who do you think makes a
So we
return
got
tonight?
Bailey, Asuka, Lacey Evans on the shelf. I would expect to see
Wherever
at
Alexa
least.
Bliss is, who knows what she's doing right now?
I'd expect to see. It's probably at Disneyland or something, right? I'd expect to see at least one of those back. Probably Lacey Evans. And then yeah, in terms of, I'm not really sure who else. In terms of the men's roster, I'm not really sure who else we're expecting. Maybe we don't see any surprises. Maybe they're done. Maybe they drop the ball after Mania like they tend to do.
I would think NXT is going to bring something. Like the Dolph Ziggler and Braun Breaker match was probably the biggest, longest segment on Monday's Raw.
Yeah.
Right? They had the title match. It lasted 15, 20 minutes. It was a good match. Breaker wins the NXT Championship back. That was a big deal, even though they didn't advertise it.
Do you think he got the reaction that they expected him to get?
You mean when he won?
On Raw, yeah. On Raw.
I don't know. I mean, the crowd was okay. They were the typical like weirdo WrestleMania crowd that tends to like to, steal a show. I felt I was watching that happen a lot, where they were trying to sometimes the audience in WWE just tries to overtake the show. There was a touch of that on Monday. I watched that match, and though I did realize I was a little surprised Braun Breaker got it back, because that to me tells me they're not bringing him up regularly, other than maybe they're going to have the title defended on Raw on a regular basis. But that he's going back to NXT to be the face of that brand again, I said, okay, well, they're pushing him there. I like him a lot. Like the way that he wrestles, his look, his feel, how quick he moves. I think he's a star in the making. I'm wondering if they're just slow playing it, because there was a lot of talk that they were going to bring him up and move him into a good spot, but this suggests to me that they're going to slow that down a little bit. The one NXT person I'm wondering about, or the people, are Imperium. I have a feeling we might see them tonight. Could just be good Gunther or Walter, whatever you want to call them. Could be all of them. But I do wonder, because he's moved back, he's moved to the U.S., he's willing to make the jump. He just lost recently on NXT. If that usually signals that something's going to happen here. So
also lost a lot of weight, and
he looks great. Although you had written, we were all in a kind of agreement. It's like we kind of missed the pudgy Walter, right?
Yeah,
like,
man, I miss Fat Walter.
it certainly was a part of his character, even though I'm sure he would not want to be known as that being a part of his character. But he looks great now.
Yeah, he looks good for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see if that happens.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing them on the main roster if that's true, and if they are booked appropriately and utilized correctly, then yeah, I think Imperium on the main roster could be very good. Hopefully they don't go the same way. We were all excited when Hit Row came up, and look how that turned out.
Insanity.
Well, it turned out well because we got Swerve on AEW, so yeah.
Yeah, well, it turned out well for one guy.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And all the other members of the group are like, well, I would come back if they asked.
Yeah.
Right? They're all doing their own thing now, right?
Of course,
so
yeah.
Swerve's the only one that doesn't care. Yeah, so it'll be interesting. I'm curious to see what happens here. Well, let's close her off. That was a good discussion. The Tony Khan stuff I really wanted to touch on because it just was everywhere, and I was kind of curious as to what you were thinking when you saw that tweet. And we've got SmackDown coming tonight. We've got Rampage, as you've mentioned, coming tonight. The Wheeler Yuta John Moxley match is supposed to be, from what you're saying, fire, so that should be good. And then you never know, right? We've got all these storylines coming out of WrestleMania, and we'll see what happens there. But
yeah, we'll be back soon.
Yeah, appreciate it, guys. Thanks for joining us on YouTube. We'll have this audio version on the podcast channel. Make sure that you tune in, subscribe to it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all your favorite platforms. And we'll pop some of these clips maybe on Twitter or Facebook too. Enjoy SmackDown, enjoy Rampage, and we will talk to you Monday night on Facebook for Talking Raw.